Good morning, everybody. This is day 3 at the Methane Pavilion here at COP26. And I am very pleased to be here with Felipe Bayo, who is the CEO of Ecopetrol, the national oil company of Colombia. But maybe, Felipe, so first of all, thank you for being here. And thank you for being here so early in the morning. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate you stopping by. Maybe we could get started just by explaining a little bit about who Ecopetrol is and what you're hoping to achieve by being here at this conference.
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here and able to have a conversation with you. And Ecopetrol is a company that's this year celebrating its 70th anniversary. And it's been mainly in oil and gas. And some more than a decade ago, it went from a company that was 100% owned by government to a company that today is partly floated in New York and in Bogota in the stock exchange.
Yeah.
So indirectly, through our shareholders and the pension funds that own a bit of Ecopetrol, we touch every day 17 million Colombians that own a bit of Ecopetrol. So in that sense, is a company that's committed to ensuring that energy security, first of all, but also the transition is something that we address in Colombia in a way that's orderly and that's disciplined. In terms of COP26, I think that us being here is first an opportunity to learn.
Okay.
In many different aspects. So things like methane, how can we actually accelerate what we're doing in methane? How can we learn more? How do we have conversations around funding? How do we have conversations around technology, around expectations? Last thing, Mark, in that sense is that I am convinced that COVID-19 first showed us how fragile we are as human beings, but it also accelerated what we need to do in terms of decarbonizing our activities and also things like electrifying what we do. And we can talk about that a bit more.
No, well, that's terrific. And I know that you have been working very hard on thinking about energy transition for your company and for Colombia. Maybe just talk for a few minutes about your journey towards net zero and how you see your company not only facilitating Colombia's transition, but the global transition.
Absolutely. So the first thing is when we think about energy transition in Ecopetrol, we think about 4 pillars. The first one is something we call competitiveness, and it's ensuring that our operations to produce oil and gas continue to be safe, efficient, ethical. The second pillar is how do we diversify our business? And in that space, recently we announced, a couple months ago, we closed the purchase of the largest energy transmission company in Latin America, ISA. That's where this pin comes from, the Conexión Jaguar. So now we're not only an oil and gas company, but a company that transports electrons as well. So in terms of the next 20, 30 years. In the second pillar of diversifying, we also have things like hydrogen. So we're piloting green hydrogen the next year or so. And there's a big pipeline of projects in that sense. Things like generating power for our own operations through renewables. So we want to hit 400 megawatts through solar, wind, and geothermal energy in the next couple of years. The third point, which is specifically what you're referring to, is how do we decarbonize what we're doing? So we've pledged to be net zero in terms of CO2 emissions by 2050. We have some milestones 2030, and this is very aligned with the government's pledge to reduce 51% of CO2 emissions. So we need to work on natural climate solutions or things around reducing our flaring, reducing fugitive emissions of methane, things like higher efficiency in our operations, and that hits the decarbonization, which is very important. And lastly, it's something we call TESG, which is technology, environmental, social, and governance. We're convinced that technology can be a catalyst. And basically, we need to put technology at the heart of becoming sustainable.
So what I'm hearing, and of course, when you're walking around the halls of this conference, you hear often about electrify everything, right? That people very much see electricity as a critical path to decarbonization. And it sounds like you're making investments in that direction. But of course, what I also hear you say is that there's a responsibility to make your existing operations as clean as possible for as long as they remain part of the mix. And methane is an important aspect of that. Of course, we all saw yesterday, the nations of the world come together with a new methane pledge. And of course, Colombia is a signatory to that pledge.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what that pledge, means for Colombia in terms of, methane reduction, and how you see Ecopetrol playing a constructive role now in fulfilling, this new obligation that Colombia and other countries are taking on?
Absolutely, Mark. And if I may, I'll very, very short story here.
Yeah.
So probably some 2.5, 3 years ago, we showed some videos from infrared cameras of some of our tank farms in the operation. And you could see the methane plumes, coming out of the tanks. A guy sitting next to me was crying. And he said, I've been in the operation for 30 years. I had never seen that. I was not aware of that. And I think part of the issue is that we need to give methane more visibility in terms of what we do. So we already have, in the last couple of years, achieved 28% of our inventory, of our facilities have been measured in terms of methane, both bottoms up and top down. So we're using satellites. There's some issues with climate and technology. We're using handheld cameras. More to be done there. By the end of this year, we want to have 95% of our facilities measured. So that's point number one. Having a good measurement, and that will allow you to ensure that when you get into the program, you have something to measure against. So that's point number one. 2, LDAR. So clearly, we have a program in terms of detecting the leaks and doing something about it. By the middle of this year, we've closed more than 600 leaks. So this is now part of the DNA in the operation, which at the end of the day has to be part of the culture. And people need to be thinking about this. And the third thing we're doing, which is thinking about the future, which is very much aligned with the pledge that was announced yesterday, is when we think about conceptually designing facilities and doing the engineering, can we go to kit and equipment that has no emissions?
Yeah.
Compressors and valves and the like. So I think that's part of the route. But at the end of the day, I think we need to get to a place, Mark, where we have a target at some stage, and hopefully we'll get there.
And do you see venting and flaring as part of the strategy as well, reducing that?
So as part of CCAC, we've basically said, look, we want to have zero routine flaring by 2030. Do we have all the answers there in terms of technology and processes? No. 15 days ago, we commissioned a new facility that has helped us reduce flaring by 50% in the last 4 years. I remember when I first walked into some of these operations, 2016, 17, I saw the flares and I said, look, this is not right. It doesn't make sense in terms of emissions, but it doesn't make sense in terms of you could be putting that gas into the systems and either doing social programs with gas or selling the gas.
Well, I often get this question because when I talk to others about this issue and I talk about the importance of reducing it and the obvious opportunities that exist across the oil and gas industry, the question I often get is, well, if it's so obvious, why hasn't the oil and gas industry been moving quicker to address these issues? What has been holding them back? It sounds like you've been doing a lot, but we both know, right, that there's still a lot of challenges ahead. So how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think oil and gas industries, it's been perceived probably as being at the center of the problem.
Yeah.
The way I think about it is that we have technology, resources, the know-how to be at the center of the solution. And that's why I think that from Ecopetrol's point of view, but from industry, we can actually say, look, guys, we can bring expertise, we can bring resources. We have the technology, we have a lot of the experts that can help us whilst we ensure that people continue to have the energy they require. Couple more thoughts there, Mark. One, I think that providing energy to our people is one of the fastest and more powerful ways of closing the gaps, social gaps, economic gaps. The COVID-19 send us back 5 or 10 years in terms of some of those gaps. And the other thing is this notion of TESG that I was referring to earlier. So when we think about environmental social governance, we think, look, technology needs to be the catalyst. We can put a lot of technology, nanotechnology. We're looking at flaring. We're looking at CCUS and capture, and you name it. There's a lot of things. We don't have all the answers. Hopefully, some of those things we can go and pick up off the shelf. But to your point, I do believe that we have the need as an industry to further accelerate.
So many people, when they think of the oil and gas industry, they think of names like Shell and BP and Exxon and Total, right? These giant global companies. I think many people often think that some of the smaller companies aren't prepared or equipped to take on the challenge of methane or to take on the challenge of energy transition. What would you say to those skeptics?
Well, as far as Ecopetrol goes, I think there's a clear commitment in terms of where we want to go and become more sustainable, again, through the use of things like technology and some of the conversations we've been having around methane. We don't have all the answers. We need to learn. But I think this is something where everybody needs to come together at the end of the day and ensure that we're aligned in the objective. There may be differences in terms of the pace at which we do things, but I think from Ecopetrol's point of view, from Colombia, we're moving ahead in the right direction. We still may need to do more things. And the other thing with the recent acquisition of ISA, which demonstrates that commitment to become a more electric company, or a company that not only provides oil and gas, but also electricity, we have a larger footprint, we have a larger platform that can help us move in that direction.
Well, I certainly thank you for sharing your perspective on both the energy transition issues, but also the importance of addressing methane and some of the really leading edge stuff that you're doing to address it. We very much appreciate not only your efforts, but being here and sharing it with us today. So Felipe Bayo from Ecopetrol, thank you so much.
Mark, thanks for having me. It's been a great to be able to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Terrific.